I'm so glad to be here with you today. You're welcome to come on over this way if you want and fill in on the grass. I know it's wet. I can't control the weather, but I'm thankful for the rain. So we're going to get started, and the first thing that we're going to do is have the prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. And Emery McClendon, who is one of our state coordinators from Indiana and is a community activist, he's going to be leading those.
Everyone, if you're wearing a hat, please remove your hat, gentlemen, and we're going to bow our heads and say a prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, our most gracious God, we thank you for the opportunity of allowing us to come here today, to be gathered, to seek, Lord, to ask our representatives to please hear our voices, to hear our pleas. Lord, we have a situation in this country that we don't even know if our representatives are listening to us anymore. But Lord, you are God. You are the one that can break hearts. You are the ones that can change attitudes and change minds. Lord, what we need is to have good elections where only citizens vote, and that's why we're here today. And we thank you, Lord, and we ask that you would lead us, that you would guide us, that you would protect us, and that, Lord, that after we leave this place, that you would take us back to our domiciles and our abodes, and that we may continue to work for Tea Party Patriots, work for our country, work for our children, that, Lord, things may change in this country and we may make America great again and keep America great. And Lord, we ask these blessings and many others in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, and we say thank you. Everyone say thank you. Amen. Now we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Where's the flag? Okay, I'm going to have to I'll have to keep my back turned so you can hear me in the mic. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. God bless the USA.
Thank you very much, Emery. So we're doing this Only Citizens Vote bus tour to ensure that American citizens only are voting in American elections. Over 80% of Americans agree with us on this issue. In fact, when we did polling, we found that 87% of Americans agree only American citizens should vote in American elections for president, Senate, and Congress. That's exactly what the SAVE Act will help us ensure is happening. It will require proof of citizenship to register to vote. It's a pretty simple bill, and it cleans up the National Voter Registration Act, which we commonly refer to as the Motor Voter Law. That is a bill or the law that allows us to register to vote in our driver's license offices. And right now, when you register to vote through those offices, you fill out a form, and the form has a simple checkbox on it to affirm, where you affirm you are a citizen. But there is no proof of citizenship. The state of Arizona has required proof of citizenship for many years, and they wound up getting sued on this over a decade ago. And with the lawsuit, it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court came back and said that they must accept voter registrations that stem from the Motor Voter Law and use that form with the simple checkbox. So what Arizona wound up doing, if you show proof of citizenship, then you get a ballot and you have president, Senate, Congress, governor, lieutenant governor, all the way on down to their most local level, the school board or whatever their most local level is. If, however, in that border state, you have not shown proof of citizenship, you still get to vote in what is called the federal-only ballot. And you vote for president, Senate, and Congress. And the first time I heard about this, I thought, man, that is really weird. It did not make a lot of sense to me. I learned about the Supreme Court case that I mentioned to you. And to the credit of the Supreme Court, they did not create law out of whole cloth. From the bench. And I am a constitutional conservative, so I don't want the court creating law out of whole cloth from the bench. And they said you had to accept the form. Now, the form can be changed through executive action. And President Trump is indeed working to get the form changed so it will require proof of citizenship. We, however, want that to happen And we want the SAVE Act also to pass so that we codify this change and we just clean up this loophole that does not require proof of citizenship when registering to vote. It's a very simple bill, and that is what we're working on. And that's the purpose of what we've done as we've gone across the country for the last 3.5 weeks. So today you're going to hear from speakers who are supportive of the bill and also from some of the members of Congress who introduced the bill and also were sponsors of the bill. The first speaker we are going to have is Cleta Mitchell, who's with the Election Integrity Network.
Neither rain, nor sleet, nor snow will stop us from coming out to demand that Congress take action to fix the problems that we experience in this country today because of that one Supreme Court decision 12 years ago. Jenny Beth has given you the history. Let me just say one of the things, just a little bit of history about how we got started with the Only Citizens Vote Coalition and the need for the SAVE Act a year ago. Early in 2024, I began to realize, with the help of some people here, Jen Wright from Arizona, who started explaining to me the problems that they'd experienced in Arizona for those many years. Poor Arizona, they've been trying to get documentary proof of citizenship for 20 years? And so I realized this is a real threat. I mean, it suddenly became pretty clear to me that was ultimately the purpose of the open borders policies of the Biden administration. I mean, what's the point of bringing millions and millions of illegals if you don't get them to vote, right? So I thought, well, this is how they're going to reelect the vegetable in chief. So we need to do something to shine a light on this and do something about it. And thus began the effort for the SAVE Act to basically amend the law in the way that the Supreme Court directed in 2013, and to require documentary proof of citizenship, not just to allow it, but to require it, because all the states are required to accept and use that form. So Chip Roy and Senator Mike Lee agreed to introduce the bill. It passed the House in July of last year. It passed the House again this year, and it's awaiting Senate action. So we can't take our foot off the pedal with the Senate. But let me tell you one of the things I've realized. I think we need a super SAVE Act. We need to actually strengthen the bill that's already passed the House, and here's why. What I've learned a lot over the last year about how porous the system is and how easy it is to add non-citizens to the rolls and how they get added to the rolls many times without their knowledge because they just get added at the DMVs, and we can give thousands of examples of that. We've documented that over many years. So you get non-citizens added to the rolls because they don't provide any proof. They may not even know they're on the rolls. And then you can't get them off because there's a real problem because of the NVRA in removing bad registrations. That's why our voter rolls are in such a mess. Jenny Beth talked about 89% of the people support only citizens voting in our elections, and that's true, and we've polled it also. Let me tell you what gets even more public support. 91% of the American people say we need to clean up our voter rolls. We need to get non-citizens off the rolls. We need to get duplicates, dead people, felons, people who've moved and don't live in a state any longer. And guess who's fighting us on that? Guess who fights us on that? The corrupt elections crowd. This is a binary choice, people. We are either for election integrity. Everybody in this crowd is for integrity in elections, honest elections, accurate elections, where it's transparent, people are held accountable for following the law, honesty and integrity. Well, if you're against honesty and integrity, then what are you for? Corruption. And we have a whole segment of people in this country, not a majority, thank goodness, but a very small minority. And I'm going to just start calling them for what they are. They are the corrupt elections crowd. And they are led by corrupt lawyers like corrupt Mark Elias. They are corrupt. They want to corrupt our elections. They have done that, and we are not going to put up with it anymore. We're done with it. So we need to strengthen the SAVE Act to codify the work that is being done by the Department of Homeland Security to where they will review your voter rolls for free for a state and identify any non-citizens so those can be removed. We need to codify that. We need to make it possible for every state to have their voter rolls reviewed to remove non-citizens. We need to make sure that the government agencies are doing their part so that they are, when they're registering people at the DMV, that before they register somebody, they make sure that they have the documentary proof of citizenship. So there is a lot for us to do, but I'm just here to say today, we are fighting a corrupt machine that does not want honesty. They do not want integrity in elections. They call us names. Their latest is now, they've been calling us election deniers. Now they've come up with a new one. Anti-voting. How many in this crowd love and want election integrity? Raise your hand. How many of you are anti-voting? Anybody? No. But I will tell you this, and you can take this to the bank. We are anti-illegals voting. We are anti-ineligibles voting. We're anti-people voting twice. We're anti-dead people voting. So if you want to call us anti-voting, you got to add which voting we're against. We're against illegal voting. We're against duplicates. We're against corrupt elections. And we are going to stand firm till our dying breath to ensure that we get election integrity back in our system, we save our elections, and we save our constitutional republic. Thank you very much.
Great job, Cleta. I think those people who call us all those names are actually democracy deniers. The next speaker we have is a man who helped write the bill and introduce the bill, Congressman Chip Roy from Texas.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My voice is a little worse for the wear after doing a little screaming on the House floor last night. It's kind of usual story here in D.C. But I want to thank Jenny Beth for putting this on. We did an event in San Antonio, Texas, in the district that I represent. I want to thank Cleta Mitchell, without whom there's no way we would have this great legislation and be able to move forward on it. Yeah, round of applause for Cleta Mitchell. And I want to thank my friend Mike Lee for introducing the bill in the Senate. He's been a great partner. You'll hear from him in a minute. But I cannot say enough how important this issue is. Can you imagine a world in which our Democrat colleagues will not support, and we had 4 or 5 in the House who voted with us, but who will not support and will not allow the Senate to move forward a bill that simply states that only American citizens should vote in American elections. That's the state of the current Democratic Party. I'm proud that we introduced this bill last year during the election, during the campaign. I'm proud that we passed it out of the House. I am proud that it was in fact bipartisan. But Chuck Schumer killed it in the Senate. We passed it again this year in the House. And now it's sitting in the Senate. And Chuck Schumer and the Democrats are saying they won't support it. We should be asking them why. Why do they believe that non-citizens should vote in American elections? And we should ask that question every day because it is central to the strength of our republic. It is central to protecting a country that our forefathers, our brothers, our sisters, our families have fought, bled, and died for. And we didn't do it so that anybody could come here and show up and vote and affect our elections. Our elections are our elections. And this bill stands for that proposition. And we should demand that we get it through, and we should hold the Senate accountable. Majority Leader Thune should bring it to a vote, bring it to a vote again, bring it to a vote again, and again, and again, to demonstrate that Republicans are serious about protecting our country and the right to vote for every citizen. And Democrats want to open it up to everybody in the world. Thank you all for being here on a gray, rainy day. Thank you for coming around the country. Jenny Beth, thank you for bringing this message across the entire country with a bus tour. Thank you for ending it up here. And thank you for your leadership. And thank you again, Cleta, and all my friends for all their leadership. I see my friends from Eagle Forum. I see my friends from Citizens for Renewing America. We've got friends, my friends from the Texas Public Policy Foundation, which I used to work at. And so many great patriots who are working to try to get this done. So God bless you all. Thank you, and thanks again.
Thank you so much, Chip. Okay, and now we have the other co-sponsor of the bill, Senator Mike Lee from Utah. Don't run at this. Be careful. Good. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. I like the Bowser Act too. Thank you. Thanks to everybody for being here. Look, this is important. This town is all about votes. It's about the votes we cast over there, and whether or not we get to cast votes here is determined by votes that are cast in our respective states and districts around the country. But voting has significance. You don't get to just walk into the United States Senate and expect to be able to vote there unless you've been elected and you've got an election certificate from your state. So too, within our respective states where we hold elections that determine who gets to come here and hold an election certificate and cast a vote to make our laws in this building, you have to have the ability to vote in your own state, in our country, in the United States of America. That must always mean citizenship. I would never, for example, imagine that I would be able to cast a vote, I don't know, to determine who gets an Oscar or a Grammy without being a member of the voting body that determines that. And so too, if you were non-citizen, if you were here in the United States, not as a citizen of this country, in no circumstance should you be voting for those who will run our government, particularly in the federal system. Now, some states and localities have flirted with this idea of allowing non-citizens to vote. I think it's a terrible idea. But never, ever must we allow that in the United States government. In fact, as the Democrats are fond of saying, we don't. We don't allow it because federal law flatly prohibits anyone from casting a vote in a U.S. election if they are a non-citizen, and it prescribes criminal penalties for doing so. It's a felony offense. You're going to get more than just a fine or community service for that. You'll do a hard time for it. But they then make this unnatural, illogical leap from there to say that because a current law prohibits it and attaches criminal penalties to it, that it doesn't happen. Those two things don't follow one from the other. The fact that we don't see it all the time and are not always able to detect it doesn't mean that it's not happening, nor does it mean that to the degree that it happens on a smaller scale now, that it won't start to happen on a larger scale later. Let's by analogy, let's bring in a news story from just earlier this week. A California woman now faces up to 6 years in prison for registering her dog to vote and then voting in her dog's name. Now, that is abominable. She faces prison time for that. She got caught. That one is harder to do. Does make me wonder how many canine and feline voters there might be out there without us detecting it. But we've made it far too difficult to detect this through a number of other federal laws. So the National Voter Registration Act, also known as the Motor Voter Law, passed in 1993, made it possible for people when applying for a driver's license to check a box, sign their name, and thereby add themselves to the voter rolls of that state to register to vote more easily. The problem with that is that a couple decades later, the Supreme Court of the United States made an unfortunate decision, wrongly interpreting the 1993 NVRA as prohibiting the states from requesting any background information to establish that you are, in fact, a United States citizen and therefore eligible to vote in U.S. elections. This was contrary to the statutory text. It was contrary to sound principles of jurisprudence. They did it anyway. They just adopted this as if it were the law, and it has not changed. So as a result of that, we opened the door. The door opened even further when President Biden let in, I don't know, what is it, 10, 15 million, however many millions of people he let into this country, in addition to those already inside the United States legally, non-legally, or a combination of the two, who are inside this country. So the combination of all those factors at once, a lot of non-citizens, we're probably looking at 30 million plus non-citizens residing in this country. And in most states, regardless of your status, if you're a non-citizen, you can apply for a driver's license. In nearly every state, while applying for a driver's license, you can check that box for the NVRA and say, I'm a citizen, sign the paper, and with no additional verification, you can vote in our elections. You know what you call this? You call it foreign election interference. Are we going to put up with that? That's exactly why we have the SAVE Act. We have the SAVE Act, and I want to echo what Chip Roy was saying, that we've got so many great partners in this, and Jenny Beth Martin and Cleta Mitchell have been absolutely indispensable. There would be no SAVE Act, there would be no momentum heading toward this great piece of legislation that we need without them and their amazing work on this. Now, the opposition to this is very serious. They're serious, but they make arguments that are fundamentally unserious that are being mistaken for serious ones. They're saying, among other things, oh, you're making it way too complicated. You can't do this. People don't have that documentation. In some cases, they're making blatantly racist arguments to the effect that this is going to exclude some people. They're just assuming that people of certain races don't have records. That's nonsense. It's racist. And it's a pretext for another argument, which is we don't want the voting franchise to be restricted to citizens. That's really what's going on there. Some of them will also say, well, this just makes it way too difficult for people. For example, a married woman who changes her name after getting married isn't going to be able to establish her citizenship. That is absolute nonsense. Look, the criteria that we've come up with in the SAVE Act is, if anything, even easier than other circumstances in which all U.S. citizens at one point or another have to establish proof of citizenship. For example, every single time you start a job, as an employee anywhere, a new job, you're going to have to fill out a form called the I-9. It is not optional. You have to do it before you start the job. When you fill out the I-9, you have to provide documentary evidence of your citizenship. And that one's fairly unforgiving. I mean, there's some ways around it if you don't have some of the documents, but they want very specific types of documents to prove your citizenship. We've made that even easier to accommodate under the SAVE Act. The bottom line is there is no good reason to oppose this. If you oppose the SAVE Act, you are indulging in the paranoid fantasy of those who have made scurrilous arguments, but more than anything, you are facilitating illegal voting. You are enabling foreign election interference. That is something we must never put up with. The fact is, non-citizens have no more business voting in this country than I have voting in the elections of Mexico, of Russia, of Germany, or North Korea. I wouldn't dream of doing that, and I do not dream of allowing them to cast those votes here, just as I wouldn't let that dog vote. It's for humans, and U.S. citizen humans only who are allowed to vote in U.S. elections. Let's make that happen. Let's get the SAVE Act passed.
Thank you, Senator Lee. You know, as a woman, when I hear that argument, I think it must be sexist men who are making it. I'm smart enough to know how to show my birth certificate, my marriage certificate, and my divorce decree. It shows that I was born in America and the evolution of my name. So when you say things like it's too difficult for women to be able to figure this out, are you kidding me? Women do this every single day in America. We're not that dumb. We're able to figure it out. Our next speaker is Ken Cuccinelli. He is the former acting deputy Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security in the first Trump administration, and he's the chairman of the Election Transparency Initiative.
Well, Well, good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. As a dog person, I'm glad they at least weren't letting cats vote in California. But I think our cause here is even bigger, not letting non-citizens vote and preserving the vote of every American citizen. Every time someone votes illegally, it dilutes your vote. And so we're here to preserve your vote. And the House passed the SAVE Act on a bipartisan basis. Maine Democrat Jared Golden had the deep and long philosophical statement, it's just common sense. And he's right. And he's right. And as Chip Roy pointed out, it was a bipartisan passage in the House. We look forward to seeing it voted on in the Senate and ideally attached to must-pass legislation. I can tell you as a former Attorney General of Virginia, it's nice that the other side points out that voting by non-citizens is illegal in our federal elections. That is true. But with no way to enforce that, it's irrelevant. When was the last time you heard of anyone arrested, charged, etc., for that offense, and only that offense? It may have been stumbled across because they were cheating in some other way, but that offense is not policed. It simply isn't. And if we want to make the preservation of voting rights for citizens real, we need to pass the SAVE Act. The Senate needs to pass the SAVE Act. I know we have a president who would sign the SAVE Act. There's no question about that. But when you all go home, and I know we've got a half dozen to a dozen states represented here, you've got to let your folks know that we want to see this move forward. We want to see the Senate vote, make them go on record. We appreciate Senator Lee leading the charge in the Senate here, just as we do Congressman Roy in the House. But the Senate is a tough animal. We've all seen this over the years. But I can tell you, as someone who used to participate in law enforcement, if you don't put in an enforcement mechanism, which is what the SAVE Act allows us to finally do, you will not enforce the law, and it will remain irrelevant. Irrelevant that it is on the books saying that non-citizens can't vote in this country. And I hate to point out ill motives, but I will. If you go back to 2021, if you remember the Democrats' H.R. 1, they were going to centralize voting in Washington, D.C. They were going to unify, give us one set of election rules, wipe out a lot of the state protections like voter ID, for example. And they had 3 provisions in that bill that tell you what they intended to do. First, they were going to automatically put every adult, not citizen, adult, in state databases automatically on the voter rolls. And every state, the toughest state against illegal immigration, still encounters illegal immigrants, and those names are in their databases, and they were just going to put them on the rolls. That was step 1. Number 2, if those people voted, it was still illegal for them to vote, but if they did, they eliminated any punishment, any criminal punishment for anyone automatically put on the voter rolls who voted illegally. No punishment. But they were still going to call it illegal. They were still going to call it illegal. And third, they created this vague new crime for state and local officials who might interfere with people's ability to vote, by which they were targeting that person at DMV who sees someone has checked the citizenship box, but they can't speak English. So they probably aren't a U.S. citizen. Having sworn in U.S. citizens, there's an English learning component to that requirement. So that's a pretty good clue. But we saw the weaponization of the Department of Justice. That new crime was put in there to threaten and intimidate state and local officials from stopping illegal aliens from voting. That's what it was for. And all 3 of those things were in H.R. 1. They were all very intentional, and they would have done the exact opposite of what we're here trying to do today. And so I appreciate all of you all being here. I want to thank Jenny Beth and the Tea Party Patriots, not just for today, but for trooping across the country twice to spread the word about why we need the SAVE Act. I was proud to join them in Atlanta, but Jenny Beth trooped across from California to North Carolina and then Wisconsin down here to D.C. So that's a lot of effort, and we appreciate it. A lot of us in the election integrity movie really appreciate Jenny Beth's leadership and the effort that she and her team put in. So thank you all for being here, and let's get this passed.
Thank you very much, Ken. You know, the enforcement mechanism that Ken talked about is really important. We have this in many other aspects of our life. One of the ones that I think about often is that we have speed limits all across this country. And from time to time, there will be cops out there checking our speed to make sure we're going within the speed limit. Having common sense checks to make sure the law is being followed is all that we are talking about right now by showing proof of citizenship to register to vote. Our next speaker is Chris Ullman, who is the president of Eagle Forum.
What an honor it is to be here today with the Tea Party Patriots. I'm Chris Ullman, the president of Eagle Forum, and I was so delighted that this event, coincidentally, is happening at the same time that we brought in Eagle Forum members from across the country to lobby in D.C. on a variety of pro-family issues. But one of the things that was already on our sheet to lobby on was the SAVE Act, because as a parent and as an organization made up of moms and dads across this country, we know the importance of making sure that only citizens vote. And we know the importance of having consequences as well. As parents, we can lay down the law, but if there are no checks and no consequences on our kids' behavior, we know that sometimes they do what's wrong. So the importance of this bill is to ensure that the integrity of our citizen-only voting has some enforcement mechanisms. That's just good law. It's what we do in our homes every day. We check up, we make sure the laws we lay down are being enforced. And parents know when they go to the voting booth, they're not just voting for themselves. They're voting for their children's futures. They're making a decision. And they have the right to have every vote respected and not diluted by people who are not citizens. We welcome non-citizens to work here and study here if they're here legally, but voting is reserved for American citizens only. And that's why Eagle Forum members are so pleased to be walking the halls of Congress today, lobbying in favor of the SAVE Act, and working more importantly in their states to make sure that the voter rolls in the states are clean and correct and made up of only American citizens. So thank you very much, Tea Party Patriots, for everything you've done. And thank you, Eagle Forum members, for being here.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thanks to all the Eagle Forum people who are here today out here in the rain and also are going to be going inside and urging the Senate to take action on the SAVE Act. Our next speaker is C.J. Pearson, and he is the co-chair of the RNC Youth Council, and he's a conservative influencer from my home state of Georgia.
How are you guys doing? It's good to see y'all out here today. You know, my name is C.J. Pearson, and I have the honor of being the co-chair of the RNC Youth Advisory Council, but also to being a Georgian. And as a Georgian, I know firsthand just how important this fight is, just how important the election integrity movement is to ensuring that we still have a democracy to one day inherit, but not actually a democracy, a republic, right? Because I think when I talk about to my peers, I'm 23 years old, when I talk to folks my age about the country that we wish to live in, we want it to be a country that is just as great as the one that our grandfathers lived in, just as great as the one that their parents lived in. But the only way that we can ensure that America remains a country that not is just made great again by President Trump's incredible America First agenda, but remains great is if we ensure that only American citizens vote in our elections. It's just not rocket science. It's not rocket science at all. Which is so interesting to me, right? Because it seems as if the left has truly lost the plot. And I remember when this issue first came up, I was like, are there actually people going out and saying that American citizens or people that aren't American citizens should be able to vote in our elections? And they were like, of course there are. But it all makes sense, right? These are the same people who argue that there are 40 genders. These are the same people who are arguing right now that somehow crime is non-existent in many of our major cities like Chicago and what we saw in the tragic incident that unfolded in Charlotte. These people are losing their minds. But that's exactly why we have to rise to the occasion. It's exactly why we have to fight to simply get our leaders to exercise a little bit of common sense. Now, I know a lot of you folks here aren't from Washington, D.C., and God bless you for it. But what I'll tell you is from my short time that I've spent in this town, there is not a surplus of common sense, which is exactly why we have to be here. It's exactly why we have to be out here pounding the pavement, going door to door in the halls of Congress, and letting them know that we will not let up, because we cannot let up. Our country is at stake. Our republic is in peril. And just because we have the White House right now, and just because we have 2 chambers of Congress right now, it doesn't mean that the left was not going to come back with a vengeance when they get power again. So we have to implement the appropriate safeguards. We have to take the precautions, take the steps to ensure that America remains America. Because I don't know about y'all, but I'm not going to allow anyone from some third world country to third world my America. That's just not going to happen here. Not going to happen here. So let us continue to fight. And realize that this is not just a post-election fight, guys. We shouldn't just be fighting for election integrity once, something happens. This needs to be a precaution that we take. We need to be vigilant always, every single year. And I love what Cleta said. It's like, let's pass the SAVE Act, but then let's pass the Super SAVE Act. And then let's pass the Super SAVE Act, because there is nothing that we should be unwilling to do to ensure that the American people have faith in the elections of our country, because that is indeed what separates us from a third world country. And God bless you all for being out here in the rain. On behalf of Generation Z, I want to thank you all, because my generation's future lies in the balance if we don't get this right. So thank you for being out here. Thank you for fighting. Thank you for being patriots. And thank you for being on the front lines and not the sidelines, because that is how we save this country. God bless y'all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, CJ. And now we have a Secretary of State from Wyoming who is going to speak next, and his name is Chuck Gray. So please welcome him.
Well, great to be here today. Good afternoon. Thank you to Tea Party Patriots Action, the Only Citizens Vote Coalition, Jenny Beth, Cleta Mitchell, can we give a round of applause to Cleta? She has been so instrumental in building the election integrity movement. And we are here today at the grand finale of the Only Citizen Vote bus tour to ask the United States Senate to finally take up the SAVE Act. I'm Chuck Gray, the Secretary of State of the great state of Wyoming, and as Secretary of State, I'm the chief election official for the state of Wyoming, and our number one priority since I entered office has been proof of citizenship for registering to vote. You know, the first year I started out as SOS, we had a saying in the office: election integrity is more than just an attestation. It's more than just a pinky promise. It's more than just somebody signing a form that they're a qualified elector. And Senator Lee did such a wonderful job of articulating the absurdity of this quantum leap that the radical left does, where they say just because non-citizen voting is illegal, that it's not happening, that proof of citizenship for registering to vote in their mind isn't needed. It is such a quantum leap, and it's an absurdity that we should be pointing out. The majority of Americans, the vast majority of Americans, support proof of citizenship for registering to vote. Poll after poll shows over 85% of Americans supporting this common sense election integrity measure. And when you're at 85%, you're not just talking about Republicans, over 95%, over 98%. You're not just talking about independents, you're talking about a majority of Democrats who support proof of citizenship for registering to vote. They ran the field poll in California that showed even in California, a majority of Democrats support this common sense election integrity measure. So what does the media do? What does the corrupt election crowd, as Cleta Mitchell calls it, we call it the CECs. What do? They have to make up these bogus arguments to oppose this measure. And we've seen how the Democrat Party has been taken over by the radical left. That's why they don't have primaries anymore. That's why they have coronations, because it is a distinct minority of our country that is putting forward this radical opposition. I want to tell a little bit of the story of Wyoming. We brought through proof of citizenship for registering to vote. We started working on it in 2023, put forward a rulemaking, and unfortunately our very liberal governor, Mark Gordon, vetoed it when I put forward that rule. And he vetoed it the very same day that President Trump and Speaker Johnson was announcing at Mar-a-Lago on April 12, 2024, that the SAVE Act was the election integrity priority of the 2024 campaign and of this upcoming administration. And now, 2 years running, the SAVE Act has passed the United States House without action from the United States Senate. Now, in Wyoming, we didn't give up after the governor vetoed our rulemaking. We went to the legislature. We have Representative Rodriguez-Williams here today, chairman of the Freedom Caucus, and Representative Baer, who led on this fight, and we brought through proof of citizenship for registering to vote through the state legislature, and it became the law of the land on March 21st, 2025. And we made Wyoming the first state in the nation to have that proof of citizenship requirement for all races. But that wasn't enough for the radical left. Mark Elias decided to sue us in early May, because when the radical left and the special interests loses before the people with popularly elected legislatures, what do? They engage in the lawfare. And we immediately went to work in preparing a vigorous defense to this lawsuit, with hiring the Dillon Law Group. Of course, Harmeet Dillon's doing great work at the Department of Justice, and together we defeated Mark Elias, and that lawsuit was dismissed in federal court a month ago. We must pass the SAVE Act at the federal level. We've shown that it works at the state level. The momentum is real. Again, for 2 years running, the U.S. House has passed the SAVE Act, and let's never forget the leadership from President Trump announcing not only on April 12, 2024 at Mar-a-Lago that the SAVE Act was the election integrity priority, a key election integrity priority for this administration. March 25, 2025, his first election integrity executive order. What was the first thing listed there? Proof of citizenship for registering to vote. Now, we know that this small subset of the left is going to continue to fight. It's going viral on X. They actually had a motion in Orange County at their Board of Supervisors yesterday to remove all dogs, all canines, all felines from the voter rolls. And they did not take it up. The left did not take it up. This is how radical they are, and that's why the Senate needs to take the SAVE Act up for a vote. We need to expose this radicalism, and that recorded vote, that is what reveals the truth. Thank you very much for your time today, and let's get this done for the United States. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary Gray, for being here all the way from Wyoming. And I know that we have people who are here from all over the country today, including Arizona, Texas, of course, Wyoming, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, and then Indiana and Illinois. And if I forgot any states, you can come let me know, and I'll make sure I include those as well. What? Oh, New York. Thank you so much for being here, New York. Utah, California, Michigan. You guys are from all over the country, and you're standing out here in the rain, and you're here from all over the country because you care, just like 87% of Americans care, about making sure only American citizens vote in American elections. The people who disagree with this are the fringe radical left who don't care about democracy in this country. Our next speaker is Congresswoman Kat Cammack from Florida.
Hello. How are y'all doing? A little rain never hurt anybody. We're doing fine. Listen, I gave birth 3 weeks ago, so I left the baby in the office and I hauled tail over here because I wanted to make sure that I was here to see friends and patriots and folks that I've been fighting alongside for years. To me, this is a simple cause. Only citizens should be voting in our elections, right? And my question to my friends and colleagues on the left is, why are you fighting this so hard? Why are you fighting this so hard? And you know, we've been in very heated debates on the House floor on this very issue, on this bill, the SAVE Act. And they say a couple of things. First thing, they say it's not really a problem. And I tell them, well, then it's really not a problem for you to support this bill, right? And they never have a response. And then the second thing that they say, which really pisses me off, is that this is going to disenfranchise married women. I am a woman, and I know what a woman is. I also happen to be married. The notion that they are putting forward a narrative that women are too stupid to figure out how to register to vote under their married name is ridiculous. And that, to me, is an insult, just one of many, that the left has continued to perpetuate. They continue to push men in our sports, and now they're telling us that we can't figure out how to register, how to vote. That, to me, is another slap in the face of American women in this country. We have a massive duty on our hands ahead, because if we don't secure our elections, make sure that our elections have integrity, that our votes are counted as they are intended when we cast them, then we are failing. We are not doing our job. We also have to make sure that we get out and secure these elections in the midterms, because we have to keep the House and the Senate for 2 more years so that President Trump can get the job done. If you voted for President Trump in 2024, we have a responsibility to deliver the final 2 years for his agenda in these midterms. But we can only do that if we secure our elections. That is going to require every single one of us, every day, calling our representatives. And I know we have folks from all over the country here today. They need to get off their tails. They need to make sure that this bill comes back to the House floor, and then we have to call every member of the Senate and demand that this bill is read and voted on in the Senate, because we know that President Trump will sign it. We have a responsibility, and we have a great opportunity, this being the last day of this amazing tour, to actually take our message here and put it into action in the Capitol behind me. So thank you for everything that you all have done, not just as Americans, but patriots who love this country, people who are willing to do the inconvenient thing of standing in the rain and standing up for election integrity. That is how we take our country back and we put America first. Thank you, Tea Party patriots. We love you guys. Let's go save our country. It starts with our elections. And thank you, Jenny Beth. You are amazing. God bless.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Before we go to our next speaker, we've talked about some of the lies and the myths from the left, including that women can't be smart enough to figure this out, when we all know women are perfectly capable of it. Another myth is that would harm the ability to vote by mail, especially for the military, and it would harm minorities. The Uniformed Overseas Citizens Absentee Voting Act, which, as you election integrity experts know, it is called UACAVA, was created to help overseas service members and their families vote. But there is no uniform proof of citizenship requirement to register to vote for UACAVA voters, and no ID requirement when they cast their ballots from abroad. In fact, in many jurisdictions, UACAVA ballots can even be returned electronically by fax or email. In 2020, 63% of UACAVA ballots were cast by civilians, meaning that a large share of these ballots were cast without any sort of citizenship check. Who are these civilians? Are they indeed citizens? Requiring proof of citizenship at registration closes this gap, answers a question, and it does so without blocking lawful military voting. And the claim that Americans who are of color or are poor are unable to acquire an ID is both false and insulting. Government issued IDs are available to anyone who is legally able to obtain one. Our next speaker is Josh Finley, who's with the Texas Public Policy Foundation.
Thank you. I'm Josh Findlay with the Texas Public Policy Foundation. I'm the director of the Election Protection Project. And Chip Roy, the author and one of the original co-sponsors of this bill, is an alum of the Texas Public Policy Foundation. We're a border state, and we are immense supporters of only citizens voting. I want to thank the Tea Party Patriots for putting this together. And I want to thank all of the citizens from California to the Capitol, from Michigan and Wisconsin down to Georgia and Texas that have come out to support, to show Washington that only citizens should be voting in American elections. And I want to thank the tens of thousands of people that have signed petitions to show Washington that this is important. Jenny Beth said just a minute ago that 87% of the people support only citizens voting in our elections. I want to emphasize that is not a partisan number. It's 9 out of 10 people that you talk to on the street support only citizens voting in the elections. And the way that we make sure that only citizens vote is by strengthening ID requirements like the SAVE Act is trying to do. I want to tell a couple of stories that show that 87% of the people believe this, not just in polling, but when they have the chance to go to the ballot box. Y'all may have heard that there was a big statewide Supreme Court race in Wisconsin earlier this year that revolved around election integrity. And in that race, it was a statewide race, a leftist was elected to the Supreme Court. What the media never talks about, though, is that on that same ballot, when people had a chance to vote directly on policy through a citizen initiative, a voter ID law was passed, strengthening ID requirements in Wisconsin. What that tells us is that election integrity issues can become partisan. They become a political fight. But when citizens have a chance to vote on policy directly, they overwhelmingly support strengthened voter ID requirements and the idea that only citizens should vote in our elections. The other thing people don't talk about is that last November there were 8 different states that either passed citizen initiatives strengthening ID requirements or making sure that only citizens vote in the elections. It's been said that this is not a partisan issue. We need to show Washington that now is the time to act. We need to pass the SAVE Act. We need to get this bill to the president's desk because we know that he's going to sign it. And for Republicans, for Democrats, for everyone across the board, there's no excuse to ignore the will of the American people on this election. So thank you all for coming out in the rain. Thank you all for braving the weather to show Washington how important this is. Let's make sure that the SAVE Act passes, that only citizens vote in our elections, and that we have the safest, most secure elections in the history of this country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Josh. And now we have the community activist who led us in the prayer and the pledge coming back up to speak, Emery McClendon.
Well, good afternoon. I'm back. You know, for a long time, we've heard this statement in the United States of America. We've come a long ways, baby. But now, in this Congress, and in a few years past, they're trying to take us back a ways, baby. We cannot let that happen. We can't let it happen. We must stop illegal voting. We must secure our elections. And we must, as black people, now I'm here to represent the whole organization. I'm here to represent every one of you, but I'm really appalled because this square should be full of black Americans. We went through the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment, the 19th Amendment, the 24th Amendment, the Civil Rights Act of 1865 or whatever year it was, and 1963. We went through hurdles, obstacles. Any of you ever heard of the grandfather clause? Any of you ever heard that they used to have jelly beans in a jar, and when black people came to vote, they would make you guess the number of jelly beans that were in that jar, or you couldn't vote? This is appalling. Do you see any restrictions upon these people that they're bringing in illegally to vote? They're not only letting them vote, but they're bringing them in and giving them stipends, giving them allocations to live in high-dollar apartments and hotels. We should be appalled as Americans. We should be demanding and standing on our heads and toes, jumping up and down and waving our arms, letting them know that we want to pass the STAVE Act. We do not want it to, just casually ask. It's something that must be done. It has to be done. And about these IDs and saying that people can't get IDs. Yes, they can. You need an ID to buy a pack of cigarettes. You need an ID to buy a bottle of liquor. So why can't they produce one to show up at the precinct? Another thing that I'm appalled with is how they're trying to disenfranchise the women's vote. Do you remember what you went through as women in the history of women, the suffrage, and so forth? We cannot give up. We cannot not let our voices be heard. We must let America know. We must let our communities know. We must let our precincts know. We must let our licensed branches know when they have people come in talking about registering to vote and don't show no IDs and don't have a birth certificate and they don't know where they came from. Tell them no. Now, what I want you to do, I know it's raining, but we need to do one thing that we haven't done today. We need to lift up our voices and say, pass the SAVE Act. Will you do that with me today? Pass the SAVE Act. Let them hear us over there. Pass the SAVE Act. And I want to thank you for being out here in the rain. I want to thank each and every one of you for being so dedicated to this cause. I want to thank Jenny Beth Martin and the Tea Party Patriots for all that they've done. I want to thank each and one of these senators and these congressmen who are trying to get this law passed because we need to protect American freedom. This is our country. We can't let people come from the outside and tell us who our representatives will be. So thank you, and thank you once again. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Emery McClendon. And now we have joining us from the great state of Ohio, Congressman Warren Davidson.
Hey, thanks so much. And look, in politics as in war, there is no substitute for victory. And often who wins the victory comes down to who's willing to suffer for it. And by being out here in this kind of weather, doing the kind of work that you guys do as Tea Party Patriots, we know you're willing to suffer for the cause. Our founding fathers laid the example in the Declaration. They pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. And often, and I'll just tell you as a former infantry guy, ground you won't defend is hard to hold. We have given up the idea of defending citizenship matters. And that's really the premise, is that citizenship really doesn't matter. We're just going to count whoever shows up. Honest elections are essential to defending freedom. But you can't have an honest election if you don't have an honest census. So we need to get this where citizenship matters when we do the census. Only citizens should be used when we draw congressional maps. It's a very intentional action by the Democrats to flood sanctuary cities with non-citizens and then count them for the census. It boosts their representation, it boosts their funding, and it replaces the people who, when they finally have the opportunities that our great country provides, they tend to get out of those cities. They've got failing schools, they've got massive crime, and people are choosing, despite lots of good things, to say, you know, I want to raise my family somewhere else, often nearby, maybe in the same, quote, Cincinnati region, but they get out of the area where they've got judges that are given soft sentences and prosecutors that are not prosecuting. And we're not counting just the citizens, we're counting everybody. And that's diluting the votes. That's taking representation from many parts of our country, like Ohio, like some of the states where you guys are coming here from today. And it's giving extra representation to places where they have a high concentration of non-citizens. So I've had a bill to do just that. I've had constitutional amendments, bills, I've pleaded with the courts, and thankfully we're going to get that. And another extension of that's birthright citizenship. The administration's doing the right things there. But citizenship always matters. One of the most basic things, though, is you can't have an honest election when you can't even tell who voted. And you can't tell who voted if you don't have voter ID. That's a common sense thing for our elections. And these kinds of common sense reforms are in the SAVE Act. So you've got the signs, you've got the chance, you already know. What are we supposed to do? Pass the SAVE Act. Pass the SAVE Act. We're working to make sure that the Senate does just that. The Senate fails us on issue after issue, but we need to get their attention and hold it so that they pass the SAVE Act. And the citizens of this country, if they will come together and make sure that their representatives know citizenship matters, it always matters, we can do all those things. We can have honest elections. We can know who voted in those elections, and it's only citizens that vote. And we can know who's representing you, because I'll tell you, as a member of Congress, the only people I represent are U.S. citizens. Non-citizens do have representation at embassies and consulates. We've got all kinds of those here in D.C. So I'll be happy, if you're not a citizen, to be friendly and direct you where you can find representation at the embassy. But it's not here in Congress. It's not in the United States Senate. And our maps for the House of Representatives and the apportionment of those representatives needs to reflect that. So we need to take action on it. The courts should do the right thing, and if they won't, the legislature needs to do it. So thank you for making your voices heard. Thank you for fighting for citizens of this country and making sure that we have honest elections. God bless you all.
Thank you, Congressman Warren. Now we have Congressman Keith Self.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Following my my brother-in-arms, Warren Davidson, who is quoting the great General MacArthur, is hard to top. But I will tell you, this is absolutely a no-brainer. The SAVE Act, the citizens of America should determine America. Our culture, our elections, everything belong to the citizens of the United States. I do not understand why the Senate will not take this up. The people who elect them are the people of their district, their state, in our case, districts, in their case, states. That's who elect them. That's who they should be answerable to. I will keep this very short because we welcome people to come legally into our states to then act correctly under their particular way they come into our states, but they do not vote in our elections. Our elections, this is election integrity matter that the citizens of the United States are the only ones that determine America, where we are going, and how we're going to get there. I'm going to keep this short because there is no substitute. As Warren Davidson said, we must win this fight. I call on the Senate to take this bill up and pass it. The House has passed it twice. Senate, do your job. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Congressman. And now we have Rosemary Jinks, who's with the Immigration Accountability Project. She and her colleague, Chris Shimolinski, were with us on the bus at almost every single stop.
Thank you so much, Jenny Beth Martin. I just want to start by thanking Tea Party Patriots Action. Jenny Beth and their entire team choreographed this nationwide bus tour to, just perfection. It was great. Today is the first day that we've had rain falling on us. We had one other rainy day, but we were under a pavilion. But, it is what it is. I am the co-founder of the Immigration Accountability Project, Rosemary Jenks, and I am part of this coalition because obviously we wouldn't have non-citizens voting if we didn't have a mass immigration problem. So the fact is that we have, according to the State Department, we have 55 million visa holders in the United States. Now, we have a population of just over 350 million, so 55 million non-citizens are visa holders. The problem is that 19 states and the District of Columbia issue driver's licenses to illegal aliens. All 50 states issue driver's licenses and real ID cards to non-citizens. So to get a real ID card, you either have to prove that you're a U.S. citizen or you have to prove that you're in the country legally. You get a real ID card. Every one of the 55 million visa holders who is legally eligible to work is automatically issued a Social Security number. So they have a Social Security number, they have a driver's license. With those two pieces of documentation, they can register to vote in almost any state in the country. The other problem we have, and Jenny Beth has mentioned this, and so have others, is the motor voter law. When these non-citizens go into a Department of Motor Vehicles to get a driver's license, the person behind the counter is required to provide registration, voter registration information. So somebody who just has crossed the border illegally or come in legally, who doesn't speak English, perhaps, is handed a form and told, just check the box and sign your name. That person, if they comply with the instructions of the government official standing in front of them, which they're likely to do, has just committed a felony. Because they've been told by a government official to check the box and sign their name. They may or may not know. There are some non-citizens who intentionally register to vote so that they can vote fraudulently. There are a lot who are accidentally registered by the motor voter law. That's a problem. By falsely claiming citizenship, which is what the crime is called, that's a felony, they become ineligible to naturalize. They become deportable from the United States. So our motor voter law is essentially entrapping immigrants into being falsely registered to vote and potentially voting. If they're in a mail-in ballot state, they're going to be mailed a ballot. They're probably going to vote that ballot because they don't know any better. So our laws have got to protect our right to vote, because every non-citizen who votes steals a vote from one of us. It cancels a vote from an American. It is time to pass the SAVE Act. It is time for Senator Thune to put this on the floor, and let's at least see where these senators stand. It's time. Pass the SAVE Act, protect our right to vote. Thank you very much, and thank you, Jenny Beth.
Thank you very much, Rosemary. And now, I mentioned to you the problems in Arizona and how it is messed up because they require proof of citizenship, but the motor voter law takes supremacy, and so they also have to take people on the voter rolls who have not shown proof of citizenship. Marissa Hamilton is now going to speak. She's with a group called Easy AZ, as in Easy Arizona, and she's going to talk more to you about what's happening in Arizona.
Hello, everyone. So in Arizona, we don't have this clear stuff that falls from the sky, so I'm very unfamiliar with it, but I've enjoyed being completely soaked today. I'm just kidding. I'm from the Northeast, so I'm totally used to this. The SAVE Act is so important for Arizona because we're one of the first states that identified this issue. And I remember back, I think over at least a decade ago, that former Senator Kelly Townsend, state senator, she had been talking to me about the fact that there's this thing where voters have not shown their proof of citizenship, and then they're registered to vote, and that we have no idea how many of them are on our voter rolls. And so she first started trying many years ago to try to get documentary proof of citizenship to be required in Arizona. And the best that she was able to do at that time, because the issue really wasn't understood, is to first put in a law to start quantifying how many people were in this situation, that they were registered to vote without actually proving their citizenship. And when that law first passed, I remembered how difficult it was. This would seem it would be common sense, especially for a border state like Arizona. And when it first passed, I think there was about 2,000, maybe less than 2,000 voters that were on the voter rolls that had not shown documentary proof of citizenship. Fast forward to today, and there's nearly 50,000 voters statewide in Arizona that have not shown their documentary proof of citizenship. And so when we passed our law that required documentary proof of citizenship to vote and strengthened that, no one had any idea that this number would grow to a level that it can change the outcome of our presidential elections or the congressional races or the U.S. Senate races. But it's a very serious issue. And most states, I'm not aware of any of the states that actually keep track of the number of voters in their state that have not shown documentary proof of citizenship. So as I've traveled around the country with Tea Party Patriots on their bus tours, it's just been an honor of my lifetime to do so. I've been able to talk to lawmakers all across the country and grassroots all across the country. And they're like, well, we require proof of citizenship to vote. And I say, okay, well, do you have a bifurcated system like what we have in Arizona? Because unless you're Wyoming, with the exception that they have, you have to have a bifurcated system. And what that means is that for people that have not shown their proof of citizenship, then they should be on a federal-only ballot voter list, and they should be given a ballot that just has the federal races, president, Congress, U.S. Senate. And if that's not happening in your state, then I'm here to tell you, you don't really have documentary proof of citizenship to vote in your elections. What's happening is that you have people that have not proven their citizenship voting a full ballot in your elections. And so the way to solve this is passing the SAVE Act. It just makes sense. And whether you are a Democrat or a Republican or independent or libertarian, it makes sense to ensure, to protect your primary ballot, that there are only citizens that have proven their citizenship voting in your elections. And so it is critical that we here in the Senate pass the SAVE Act, make sure that we are able to save the republic. And I'll tell you a quick story of what we found in Arizona. So even after we did all of this work to strengthen all of our laws and tighten everything, we thought for sure, okay, we are onto something. We now know who has shown their proof of citizenship and who hasn't. So everything should be okay. But then last year we found out from our now disgraced, fired Maricopa County recorder and our current Secretary of State, who in my personal opinion needs to be fired, Adrian Fontes, that there was a glitch in the system. So imagine after all of the work that we did to be able to identify voters that needed to show their proof of citizenship, he comes and says, there's been a couple of decades probably that there's been a glitch in the system where there is a group of voters that should have had to show their documentary proof of citizenship, but the system was just marking them with a digital checkbox saying that they already did. That ended up equaling out to 200,000 voters across our state. 200,000 voters. And they said, but don't worry, we're very confident everyone are citizens. Okay, well, Mr. Secretary of State, how did you find out this issue? Oh, well, we found that there was a non-citizen that was registered to vote and had a check mark in the system saying he had shown proof of citizenship. Oh, well, that's interesting. So then Our organization, with the help of America First Legal, sued to be able to get transparency on this issue. And they, at that point, they had only said there was 100,000. Then there was a spot in the media of another non-citizen who was here legally, who said, look, I am registered to vote, but I didn't register myself to vote. The system, the motor vehicle division system, registered me on my behalf without my consent, and I haven't been able to get off the voter rolls. And so then that's where they found the other 100,000 voters that they didn't know about this issue. Then in the primary last year, when we had volunteers calling to make sure voters were able to vote, one of the voters that we called said, hey, I'm a citizen of France. We're like, well, you're not supposed to be a voter. Why are you on this list? And he said, well, I didn't register to vote. The MVD system registered me to vote, and I haven't been able to get off, and I don't know what to do. And so I public records requested his voter record, and sure enough, he had a jury duty form saying that he's a citizen of France. And so if even Arizona, with all of our checks and balances and our required documentary proof of citizenship, have a system that is allowing non-citizens to slip onto our voter rolls, even without their consent, then what is happening in all the other states? It is time that we must pass the SAVE Act and have citizen-only voting with documentary proof of citizenship required in every single state to vote in federal elections. It just makes sense, and I want to thank Jenny Beth and Tea Party Patriots and Cleta Mitchell and all the fighters and warriors out here that are standing in the rain with us today, showing our dedication to our nation and our dedication to keeping the republic, because government goes to those who show up, and you guys have shown up over time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Marissa, and thank you for answering the call and joining us on the bus tour. We needed an extra set of hands, and she was willing to come join us for 2 weeks on the road, pretty much spur of the moment, so we really appreciate that. Before we go to the next speaker, I just want to give a shout out to other members of my team who helped pull this together. We just had the idea of doing the bus tour 11 and a half weeks ago. We were on the road within 8 weeks of thinking of the fact that we needed to do the tour. It's done very, very quickly, and it would not have happened if it were not for Landon, Kevin, Jeff, Cecily, Megan, Kelly, Jennifer, Greg, Lance, John, Alan, Melanie, Lily, TJ, Luke, Joanne, Ty, Shonda, and Bill. And I just want to make sure that I thank them publicly, because I get to be up here and everyone sees me, but I wouldn't be able to do this if it weren't for my incredible team. So thank you guys so much. Our next speaker is Congressman Ralph Norman from the great state of South Carolina.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. You have the best smile. Thank you. Thank all of you for coming out in this less than good weather, but this is a very important topic. Thank you for holding the boards up. You know, this, I was talking to people earlier, this should not even be a question. Safe, secure elections are the backbone of this country. You know, if we don't have secure and safe elections, we cease to have a country. Democrats are lying, saying this bill prevents women from registering to vote. It protects women's right to have a vote. This bill ensures that only American citizens, those who have earned that privilege, can cast a ballot in our federal elections. This bill offers more than 6 ways to verify identity, ensuring all Americans have access to their ballots. It codifies President Trump's executive action to ensure our voter registration process. Any Democrat or any person that's against this bill should be asked the following questions. Why do they refuse to protect America's constitutional right to vote? Why? Why are they opposed to securing our elections? Why? Why do they stand against the American people's mandate? If you need an ID to board a plane, buy cold medicine, or even check into a hotel, you sure ought to need proof of citizenship to vote for President of the United States.
we've seen record number of illegal aliens crossing our southern border. 15 million people and counting. Does anyone believe that they will not try to interfere with our elections? Every fraudulent ballot casts out the vote of a hard-working American. Folks, that's unacceptable. We cannot put up with it. This isn't about partisanship. It's about patriotism. Every citizen, Democrat, Republican, and Independent, should agree that our elections belong to us, the American people. We, the people, decide the future of our great country, not illegal aliens, not foreign nationals, not bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. The SAVE Act makes sure of this. Let's stand up and continue to stand up for honest and free elections, folks. That is the only way we're going to save our country. That is the only way for future generations to take part in their lives and ensuring this country remains the beacon of hope for the rest of the world. God bless each and every one of you. Thank you for taking the time to come out. God bless America.
Thank you, Congressman Norman. And now we have another congressman from the great state of Wisconsin, Tom Tiffany.
Hey, no better day to be here, right? Yeah, no better day to be here. Great to join the Tea Party Patriots. Thank you for your continued efforts. We're winning this battle. We are winning this battle bit by bit. Look at the decision that came out of Michigan yesterday in regards to the electors. We are winning this. I hope everybody will stick with it. So anyhow, the right of citizens to vote has always been a foundational principle here in the United States of America. After being trapped for 4 years under a failed immigration system that allowed millions of illegal aliens into our homeland and an election system so broken, even a dog from California had its vote counted in 2021, it's clear reform is necessary. Thankfully, there's a new sheriff in town. President Trump is making it a priority, right? He is making it a priority that we have election integrity and we make sure illegal aliens cannot vote. So shortly after the president signed his executive order requiring proof of citizenship when registering to vote, us House Republicans introduced and passed the SAVE Act to enshrine this common sense into law. Today marks 5 months since the SAVE Act passed the House in a bipartisan manner. For the 208 House Democrats who voted against this legislation, they openly admitted what many of us in the room have known for years. They want non-U.S. citizens to vote. It has been their goal from the beginning. They did not say it out loud to begin with, but it is very clear at this point. That's what the game was for opening the border, is to bring in new voters. America made it clear on November 5th when they elected President Trump and delivered the trifecta of Republican leadership. They want true, strong leaders in office that will put American citizens over illegal aliens. We're not going to be able to turn the page here today. So, let's turn the page. Let's turn the page to having election integrity. I'm calling on the Senate. Let's get a vote. Let's get a vote in the United States Senate here on the SAVE Act to make sure that only legal citizens are voting in our elections here in America. The American people want it. It is a bipartisan issue, as we've seen in our state of Wisconsin, and let's continue to push the SAVE Act to be enshrined in law here in the United States of America. Thank you, Tea Party Patriots, for all the work that you've done.
Thank you so much. It's crazy weather. Thank you for being here. Thank you. Congressman Tiffany, thank you so much. And that wraps up our speakers for today. Now, let me tell you what else we've got going on. So we went across the country from California to North Carolina, then from Wisconsin to here. We worked to get petitions signed supporting the SAVE Act. We got 50,319 petitions signed. And we want to get those petitions delivered. Now, I understand the weather is a little bit crazy, but if you would like to help us deliver the petitions to your senators, we'd really appreciate that. So if you're willing to do that, you can just go over there. My team is over in that direction, my left, your right, and we'll get you the petitions for your senators and get those delivered. And then we'll get the rest of them delivered later this week when it's a little less rainy, and my team and I will get that done. So thank you very much for being here today. Thank you for standing in the weather on this chilly autumn day, and let's get this done. Let's pass the SAVE Act. Let's make sure only American citizens vote in American elections. Thank you so much.